Good morning again from Colonial Williamsburg. We have had quite a morning already. We actually had to go to urgent care this morning. Lincoln has been sick for most of this trip, so we had to stop by and get him checked out, get some antibiotics and medicine for him. So we're getting a late start. I'm not sure what we're gonna do today. We are back on Duke of Gloucester Street, and I think we're gonna check out some other shops, maybe do some performances. How you feeling, buddy?
Fine.
Yeah, we got some medicine for you.
Hiya.
I am a little worse for wear. I don't know if I want to put this picture of me on the internet, but it's been some poor sleep for everybody. And anyway, we're back though, and we're gonna maybe check out the Capitol today also.
Over there.
We left our lanyards because we left the room to go to the urgent care and the pharmacy, and Daddy, we forgot them. So Daddy had to go back to the room to get those. You're not allowed in most of the places. Some people check, some places don't check. So he had to go back and get those for us. So we're just hanging out here. Everybody's up and about. The town has come to life. So
Come on, fire.
we'll check out some stores, check out maybe some theater performances and the Capitol,
Lava.
and maybe go swimming. Of course, be sure you hit like and subscribe and follow the rest of our Williamsburg.
Like and subscribe. If you don't, I'll come to your house and tickle your toes.
We have more videos on this Williamsburg series too. So we've had several other days here and at historic Jamestown. So be sure you do that, and let's go check out our explorations and our adventures today.
Technically, my appointment is at 12:30, but I'm a teacher, which means that if you are on time, you're late. No one wants. I appreciate that. Well, I actually should have asked. Are you here to meet a person of the city at 12:30? You're gonna meet. Oh, good. I'm in the right place. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance. My name is Ann Wager, Mrs. Wager, your humble servant, and as I'm sure you've already guessed, I'm a teacher. Specifically, in this year of our Lord 17 and 74, I am the teacher of the Williamsburg Brace School. How do I explain it? It was the first when it opened 14 years ago in 1760, and now it is the only official school for blacks in Virginia. Slaves, mostly, of course. I mean, all of my students are between the ages of 3 and 10, but most of them are around 6 or 7, before valuable property really increases in its value asset. Well, in any case, I teach reading, spelling, sewing and knitting, of course. Half my students are girls. Lessons in etiquette. And of course, the beliefs of our official church in Virginia. King's Church? Church of England. Sorry, you're not all from Virginia. I shouldn't have presumed. Can I leave you with one last piece of advice? Yeah. Good heavens, I hope I'm not the only person who asked that question to. Well, you can't learn about a whole city of 1,800 people by asking one person. I'm not the almighty. I wouldn't want to be. I would not want to be. So my suggestion, ask your question again. Ask it to a completely different person. Ask the same question to 3 different people. For you might get 3 different answers, but combined, I guarantee that the combination of answers will tell you far more about Williamsburg than if you just ask one person. I am your humble servant, and I thank you graciously for your time. Mrs. Wager.
Next up, touring the Capitol, the government building. This is also included as part of your general Williamsburg admission, but there are guided tours that start at certain times, so you can't just walk through on your own. It's kind of hard to see. The old Capitol. Here, Patrick Henry first kindled the flames of revolution by his resolutions and speech against the Stamp Act, May 1765.
My name's Alex Clark, and we're going to spend about 30 minutes together. Before we go in the building, you should know you're not actually going to tour the original Capitol today, either of them. This building is a replica of the first Capitol that stood on the site from 1705 until it burned in 1747. Now, it's just lucky that an anonymous artist around 1740 engraved a copper plate with an image of that building. We found it in 1929, and that way we didn't have to make a lot of really good guesses about the second Capitol that stood here from 1753 until the last part of it burned in 1832. So when you string all that together, you're going to tour the third Capitol building, aren't you? Well, this one was actually built between 1931 and 1933. So it's a modern building that's made to look 300 years old. Now, the Capitol was the state house for the colony and briefly the Commonwealth of Virginia. You may have already learned our capital moved to Richmond in 1780. We're going to talk about two of the most important events that occurred in that brief Commonwealth period. As background, you should know, Virginia was the oldest, largest, wealthiest, most populous, and most loyal of His Majesty's colonies. There's a remarkable thing on May 15th of 1776 when her delegates declared their independence from Great Britain. The next thing that they did is instructive because they did not publish a constitution or a frame of government next. Instead, they published the Virginia Declaration of Rights. So they evidently felt the British had violated their rights to the extent they wanted to try to put them beyond the reach of their own government even before they put that government in place. I think you'll agree some of your dearest rights are expressed in court. So the first chamber I'll invite you to take a seat in, downstairs on the other side of the building, is the General Court of the High Court of Colonial Virginia. We'll talk a little bit about government theory there, and then see how it worked out in the court system. We get upstairs in the middle of the building, the joint conference room. That's where we'll discuss the English precedent for the Virginia Declaration, and a man named George Mason, who deserves a lot of credit for ours. And we'll come downstairs on this side of the building, the room just behind me, the lower house of the legislature. We'll find out just what it took to get the founders in Virginia to be willing to reject their king. So if you would, follow me. Scary. Virginia is the oldest colony, so when our legislature sat at Jamestown in 1619, it was the first in British North America. They started to set up a county court system then, which by the 20s had reached a form that we would recognize today. Happily, the Williamsburg James City County Courthouse still stands uptown on Market Green, and I urge you to go there. Now, then as now, 90% of what goes on in court is civil in nature. So the county courts are hearing smaller civil suits with the right of appeal for anything that reached half the original jurisdiction of the High Court, which happened to be 20 pounds. In other words, you could appeal 10 pounds at a time, when a laborer, a small tradesman, or a typical 6-hogshead planter might make 20 or 30 pounds a year. The county courts are also fining or corporally punishing people for misdemeanors. This is a good time to remind you that corporal punishment, public humiliation, and slavery are part of the human condition at this time. Well, in 1775, the Parliament sent the American governors a plan that would allow the colonies to tax themselves as long as they followed the quotas set in London. The reigning monarchs are on the wall behind me. This is George III and his Queen Charlotte. The others are George's grandparents, George II and Queen Caroline. It's when George III heard about the Battle of Bunker Hill that he opened Parliament in October of 1775 by declaring the colonies in rebellion. In May of 1776, when the fifth and final Virginia Convention came together here, about half the delegates brought instructions that they were to declare Virginia's independence. They couldn't do it on arrival because the Treasurer Nicholas publicly opposed independence. It surprised a lot of people when Patrick Henry agreed with him. Of course, Henry knew Mr. Nicholas very well. He was a brilliant speaker. What he actually said was that he too had entertained doubts about independence, and then perhaps a foreign alliance would be necessary first. When they took the vote on the 15th of May of 1776, the convention unanimously declared Virginia's independence from Great Britain. According to James Madison, in one sense, ours is a government where the preponderance of power is in the hands of the people. Their officials will serve either for a fixed term, during pleasure, or during good behavior. I would offer, if the founders gave us the preponderance of power, that they expected us to use it, specifically by perpetuating and overseeing our own government. Thomas Jefferson tells us exactly what happens if we don't. He says, any government left solely to the rulers of the people will inevitably degenerate, because there's no form of government ever established without at least traces of weakness and corruption, which ambitious and avaricious men will always attempt to expand and exploit. Faithful stewards will put public good before private and political gain every single time. They will earn every penny we can pay them and deserve a lot of respect for going to the trouble to do it. On the other hand, if they prove incompetent or worse, negligent or corrupt stewards of the Republic's bloodless treasure, if they should take authority not delegated by the Constitution or sanctioned by law, or have the temerity to attempt to rule the people without our consent, we have a duty to vote them out of office again and replace them with others who will presumably be more faithful with our trust. Because tyranny is always much easier to prevent than to overthrow once it has been imposed. And it seems there's a really curious Frenchman. His name was Alexis de Tocqueville. He came here in 1827, or about 50 years after we got started. He poked around in the States for a couple of years and then published Democracy in America. I think one of his more telling conclusions was when he wrote that the American Republic will endure until the day Congress discovers that they can bribe the public with the public's money. Finally, I'll leave you to what Thomas Jefferson said about mistaken opinions, by which, of course, he was referring to political dissent. And yeah, I guess you remember the Adams administration. He knew a lot about that, didn't he? Well, Adams had passed the flagrantly unconstitutional Alien and Sedition Acts that allowed them to expel Jefferson's foreign followers and fine and jail domestic ones if they dared speak out against administration policy. So in his first inaugural speech, Jefferson simply stated that mistaken opinions can always be tolerated as long as there is reason to combat them. Well, I think you'll agree that emotion is the opposite of reason. The last thing we should let happen is to allow unscrupulous people to use destructive emotions like fear, anger, and hatred to pervert our political decision-making process. Because as long as we're reasonable about policies and those who will administer them, we'll always be free. Because regardless of what you may have been taught or told, the founders were brilliant, good men who established our government on the principle of individual liberty at a time when that was not even universally possible, confident it would be strong enough to free everyone and admit them to citizenship. They divided the government against itself, so they hoped it would be at least less likely to oppress us. And they hoped that even during our deepest disagreements that we would remain whole as a people. Which is why they gave us the motto, "E pluribus unum," out of many one. So we're Americans because the rights that we enjoy nobody else does. Our government is sworn to guarantee them. So don't let anybody tell you that it's all right for the government to take your neighbor's rights away from you because of who he is, what he looks like, or how he thinks. Because if they do, they're no longer rights, and you've forfeited them too. Of course, they gave you a participatory government that only works if you participate. So in years like this, you got to try to determine whether your administration has actually adopted policies that, for instance, might make you feel safer walking the streets at night, able to go about your business without being excessively taxed or spied on or even arbitrarily prosecuted by your government, and able to make a living at what you choose to do so you can buy the things you need and maybe a couple of things you want too.
Okay, so our tour is over. There was a lot of information about political theory and what was said and written by the founding fathers and the various people that were making all the decisions for the legislature and for the government and for independence. So the first room that we went in was a court room to kind of enforce those laws and rules, of course. He talked a lot about, needing a lawyer and having a jury or not having a jury. Then we went upstairs into kind of like a joint meeting room where the different committees could meet and talk and discuss their proposals, I guess. And then the last room was the House of Burgesses. It was actually where all the legislature and the voting and the final decisions on things were made. So that's kind of a little more about the geography of that building, and not as much. There wasn't as much of that discussion with his tour, but it was a lot of inspiration. So if that's just a little more information about what you just saw. I'm watching. Take me home. Listen. Take me home. Gotta do it slow. Slow it down.
Take me home. Yep.